Jack. All right. You got this stuff?
Yeah. All cleaned and oiled.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's get it on.
Who are these guys?
It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
Hot damn, it's time to get down to the jam. It's time to get down, it's time to get down, it's time to get down to the jam. I said it's time to get down to the know, it's gonna get on down with the know. On the morning coffee show, on morning coffee with Keith, here on Pop Culture Minefield.
Excuse me, can I get a cup of coffee? Black?
Can't you see we talking? White?
Yes, we embrace the suck here on Pop Culture Minefield. I just put this face up. It was the only picture I could find that was close to looking like Keith. So we didn't want the audience freaking out.
It's like twins.
What's even funnier, Al, and by the way, our guest today is Al Nickerson. We have another Keith that comes on our show every once in a while from another channel, and he's like really like an albino white, so we call him White Keith and Keith Black Keith. So people aren't confused when they're on the show together. Oh my God, we're so racist. Penny is here. Good morning, Penny. I'm glad you're here.
Penny and Tim.
Keith is en route. Just so you know, I talked to him when he was in his car driving. I can't talk now. I'm driving, is what he said to me. I went, okay. So Mrs. A is here. I see that. Oh, and Vinzinger is here, a.k.a. El Otaku, a.k.a. the Weeb Pillar. That's right. Who else is here? Tim is here.
Oh, Meth has just arrived.
Meth is here. My bro. This isn't Keith. Liars. Yeah, I know. We're just lying sacks of shit here at Pop Culture Minefield. That's all I got to say. So, good morning. This is Morning Coffee with Keith. Keith will be here momentarily, at least according to the last reports I heard. There were sightings. You never know, though, in Springfield. Somebody says they saw a black guy. You just assume it's Keith, but it may not be. Nadia, what is up? She is my co-host tonight on 80s Fright, when we talk about classic 80s horror films. And occasionally, because Nadia is a 90s girl, we'll pop in a 90s movie too. So good to see everybody here this morning. And I hope everybody's had a good week. We're past the hump day. I hope everybody successfully humped somebody, because that is the law in the United States, that you have to hump somebody on hump day. Hence the name, right, Al?
No.
Now we'll be categorized as a baby. Oh
We've been demonetized the moment they see my face. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a good week so far. We do have a very special guest here today for Keith, and that is Al Nickerson, comic book artist. I've actually seen some of your work.
Thank you.
On the Archies, because I am a big fan of the Archies. I grew up on them.
Excellent.
I don't like what they've done to them recently,
I
but
agree.
you know what? Woke has destroyed so much, and that's their goal, really. They said we're coming after your stuff years ago, back in the 2000s, and because they didn't like nerddom. They didn't like us nerds, geeks, you know, and they did with a vengeance. They took over Marvel, DC. They had impacts on the entire industry, and but because of them, something interesting happened, which is the opening of a door for independents to take and do their own shit, because people got tired of, oh, look who's here. Oh, thank God the black guy's here. I was getting so sick of talking. So, Keith, I was explaining how the basically by woke taking over the major comic book companies, it opened a new door for independent comics. But ironically, and I just said this the other night on my show, and I have no beef with either, because I've known Ethan Van Sciver for years, long before Comicsgate and all that shit. I've known him, and I don't know this other Ripa guy at all. I followed him, but I don't really know much of him. But the fandom on social media has turned those two in the big two now. They're like DC Marvel now. They're at each other's throats, and the fans are at each other's throats. And it's like, you guys can't stop yourselves, can you? Talking to nerds and geeks. You have to have your big two all the time. Why not just open the door and let all the floodgates let loose on some of these independents and support them all instead of focusing on just two? And it's frustrating. As an independent creator myself, and I'm sure Al is listening to me right now, and I am curious, what do you think of that statement, Al?
Well, yeah, I think it would be very important, especially if you're on the same side of the fence politically. I think it would be better if we all sort of got along and supported each other. So, you know, we shouldn't be like them. And there's a reason why we're all on the same side of the political fence, because of what's going on in the comic book industry now. So, yeah, I agree. I think it'd probably be better.
And it's been going on for a few years. People think that this is like a new thing.
Right. Yeah.
Watched it.
Yeah, I do think it's better that we all should work together and get along as best we can.
Which is interesting because, again, on social media, they have turned Ripaverse and Ethan Van Sciver against each other, and that includes the fandom, and it's back to DC Marvel bullshit. It's like, it drives me crazy. Keith, you are here. I finally heard you.
I apologize. First and foremost, thank you, Al, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to Crusader and Gary and of course Martin for engaging the show and engaging everyone that has shown up today. Thank you to our audience. Let me at least just say this. I do agree that the entire industry isn't what it once was. There has been a lot of stuff going on, not just with people that have a particular point of view, but a lot of stuff going on with certain companies that have a monopoly on in the comic book industry and using that as a way to enrich themselves and find different ways of controlling the rest of the industry in how they deliver comics. And that also has not helped the industry. Hashtag build back better. Build
back better. There you go. Build back better.
But do you actually think, Al, that with a lot of the smaller companies that are coming in to fill the gap left by Marvel and DC, now that they are now wholly corporate owned entities, do you feel like there is an obligation to try to up what you do and to at least try to approach things in a way that will allow you to reach at least the fans of this art form instead of, just aiming for new readers?
Yes. There was a time when working in comics, in the 60s and 70s that you either work for Marvel or you work for DC. And then a lot of independent books were coming out, and you had Image in the early 90s. And now with corporate-owned comics with Marvel and DC, they're a mess. And it's really affected the direct market. It's affected comic book stores. So I think this is a great time for indie creators and self-publishers just to do their own work to reach their audience with as few obstacles as possible, and to also work directly with retailers. And I think that because Marvel and DC, they don't care about their audience, they don't care about retailers, and they just want to indoctrinate people, it's just a great time to avoid them and just do your own stuff and get it out there. yeah, this is the best time I've ever seen for the opportunity for creator-owned work to be published. Yeah, so don't work for Marvel, don't work for DC. If they crash and burn, that's fine. Unfortunately, it does affect retailers and affects the direct market, and that breaks my heart. But it's a great time for independent creators. So yeah, do your stuff, get it out there, and don't have to worry about anybody else. Don't. It's insane because you don't have to worry about getting a literary agent. You don't have to worry about dealing with publishers or editors. You don't have to worry about an editor telling you how to write and draw your stuff. Just do your own work. You can get it out there, and if you have a story to tell, then go and tell it.
On a little more personal note, now as a comic book fan, you obviously had a particular. I mean, first of all, let me at least ask, where did you buy your comics growing up? Was it from a mom and pop comic book shop, or was it from a particular store, or?
Yeah, so when I was really young and I started to read comics as a kid, yeah, it was before the direct market. So you get comics in like the grocery store or the local newsstand or in a drugstore on the spinner rack. So that's where I would get my comic books when I was a kid. I think the direct market was great, for a time, beginning probably in the mid or late 1970s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of different opportunities to buy comics back then. Not so much now.
Would you like to continue going along what we had with direct market, more of a mom and pop shop type thing, or would you like to see something else, like going into more of like what you see with Barnes and Noble and other stores having just dedicated areas for a lot of comic book work?
I think now, yes, I would like to see comic books and graphic novels sold at many stores as possible. But I think before the direct market, I mean, newsstand sales were so terrible. And I think the direct market did help, comic book sales. But now, because when I was working for Archie, like I would tell people like what I did for a living, and they're like, do they still even make comic books? So the problem is with the direct market is that it's really the number one place to get comics, but you have to go to a comic book store to buy your books. But yeah, stores, Barnes and Noble selling comics would be great. It would be nice to have comic books sold in, grocery stores and drugstores again. And I don't know if there are any newsstands anymore. So, but yeah, I think we need to get comic books out there so that people that don't actually go to comic book stores know that comic books still exist and that they can purchase them.
And sadly, I want to throw in there though, because Keith and I are friends with these guys who have lost some of our friends who lost their comic shops because of what happened in the industry. Diamond Comics, and I'm going to bring this up because you're part of this too. You know what I'm talking about. I refer to Diamond Comics, the previous iteration of it, as the mob, and they ran the industry like the mafia. It's just ironic the guy that ran it is Italian, as some people would say, and they would force mom and pop comic shops to buy books that they knew weren't going to sell, and then they would turn right around and publish that elsewhere as, look at these sales. Well, those sales aren't to the individual buyer, that's to the comic shop, and it was hurting them. They didn't care. They didn't care about the mom and pop shops. All they cared about is that bottom line, and they killed the mom and pop comic shops across the United States. That's DC and Marvel in collusion with Diamond. And Diamond, they've kind of changed their tunes. They've had to change their model because they got dumped by Marvel and DC. They now have their own internal stuff for doing that. But at the same time, I still don't trust Diamond. I really don't. But we watched the industry in the 90s all the way to today being murdered. Do you recognize that as well,
Al? I do. Also in the early 90s, you had the speculator boom, which increased sales of comics, and a lot of people were making a lot of money.
Their version of the Blue Book, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's when I actually started working in comics in 1994. So yeah, retailers were making money, publishers were making money, more books, more titles were being created, and it gave a lot of job opportunities to a lot of different artists and writers, and that was great. But then the bubble collapsed in on itself, and the sales went back to normal, and then that really hurt some publishers and the comic book stores. But now what we're seeing now today, with the direct market, comic book stores are suffering, and it's not just comic book stores. I mean, I remember there used to be bookstores all over the place, B. Dalton and other bookstores, Barnes and Noble.
Right.
You don't see a lot of that anymore, and even Christian bookstores aren't doing very well.
We have a question for Al from Messenger.
I think that's true. Manga does outsell American comic books in the States. There's no denying that. And Mike is actually the expert on manga and anime. But would you agree with that, Mike? Do you think that, And
I wouldn't.
Why is manga so popular compared to American comics?
See, here's the thing. Well, first of all, I mean, I wouldn't exactly call myself an expert, but I mean, I know what I know, right? And no, that's fine. Here's the thing about manga, about the Japanese approach to comics. It's see, right now Japan is kind of in the early stages of what we're going through in North America right now, because we talked about this on over at my channel. I think it was like back around March or April, and there is a movement in Japan that's going on right now. A communist party, I kid you not, in Japan that actually even tried to petition the UN to make the manga industry and even the anime industry to stop drawing and showing the way they draw women, stuff like that, attractive females and whatnot, to the point where they would even go in front of convenience stores, bookstores. Sorry about the train.
Is that what that was? I just thought that's the way you Canadians farted.
Oh, yeah, geez. Well, that's partially true. To where they would actually, take surveys of people. Hey, what books are you buying? Why are you buying it? Do you feel like, maybe slightly ashamed that, this publication or that publication is, shows, these voluptuous women or anything like that? And it's becoming actually pretty scary in Japan, how that direction is going, because it's exactly what we had to go through in North America and what's damaging the industry. But the way that their approach to comics is, it's like they take maybe, I don't know, a combination of a couple of things, right? Like let's say we do a story of something like Dungeons and Dragons, but we add a different element into it, like cooking. And let's merge the two ideas together into like this fantastical story. It's like they have this different mindset of storytelling, which doesn't even compare to story writing here in North America. It's like totally divergent, and it's nothing that we see here, because nobody writes those kind of tales here in North America. And that's what makes it so appealing, because it's just sometimes totally off the wall, totally different. And that's what grabs people's attention, because it's not the same repetitive stuff that we've been used to for years and years and years on end. Bad guy fights good guy. It's the same old kind of story. It's not the same recycled, I don't want to call it garbage, because that's the stuff that we kind of grew up on, but it's not the same recycled, rehashed idea over and over and over again. It's always different. It's always fresh. It's always appealing. the artwork is definitely different than, you know, the slews of different kinds of artists that we have here. You know, they have their own styles, you know, just like many of them do, but it's just not a standard a quote unquote standard North American comic look. You know, and you got the same thing, like, you know, with some of the comics that came out in Europe like many years ago, like I don't know, like Mobius and whatnot. It was a different style, and that's why it had like this kind of cult following, because it was different. It wasn't the same kind of look that we see here in North America.
So
That's what I think.
So I taught for 10 years at a college, and I taught a couple of different art classes, and one was a class called Sequential Art Comics Illustration, which was a class that I created for the college. I taught the students about how to draw comic books and comic strips. We talked about creators' rights and self-publishing and how to work in the business. What I always found very interesting is the majority of those students really enjoyed manga. They enjoyed manga. They enjoyed webcomics. They would watch animation online, but mostly it was material that was free. Like, you know, they didn't have a whole lot of money. So the stuff that they sort of gravitated to was entertainment that did not cost them any money, but they loved manga. Like, they weren't reading newspaper comic strips at all, although they did like Calvin and Hobbes, which has been out of print for decades. But they loved manga, and it really influenced their tastes. And I always found that a little odd, like, why? But they weren't reading like monthly superhero pamphlets, you know, that you would find published by Marvel and DC, but they love manga, they love web comics, they love watching animation online, they loved anime, so they loved all that sort of stuff. It was really interesting to see the younger generation liking the kinds of things that they like, and figure out why.
I've always, you know, I've been thinking about this myself, and I think part of it is the fact that it is so different than what is offered here in the States. It is manga and anime both seem to have a very distinct way about them that is very different from what we offer here in the West and in North America. Really, there is no symbiotic relationship seemingly between comics and, say, American animation and cartoons. We don't really have that. We have artificial versions of that. Disney in offering classic comics based on their classic cartoon characters. But outside of that, there is no relationship like that. Whereas with manga and anime, there seems to be a very distinct type of relationship that makes it different. You can have 5 different properties that are both anime or manga. And in certain cases, the manga would come first and then the anime, or the anime would come first and then the manga. But both would be high quality. Both would be seemingly things that would garner attention, never really speaking down to its audience, no matter which one you're talking about. So you kept the same audience, sometimes even growing that audience. Here, we've never really had that. And so the overall feeling is that comics, like cartoons, are considered for kids. And we never attempted to try to do very much here in this country besides anything that wasn't aimed of a more adult nature with adult type settings, usually more violent, more sexual. We never really tried to appeal to adults any other way with any other things outside of, you know, maybe the random comic here and there. So for a lot of younger people growing up in the late 80s, especially into the 90s, anime and manga was very, you know, it was something different. And now you've had an entire generation where since the 2000s began, it's pretty much been an all-you-can-eat buffet of just choices. Whereas here, for us in North America, everything's pretty much collapsed. and a lot of it has to do with bad timing. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, it's bad timing, but also an influx of woke SJW, whatever you want to label them as. Because the one thing you're safe from with manga is pretty much any type of overly didactic storytelling. It's ridiculous how it gets that way. It's like everybody feels like they need to be a priest in a pulpit and teach their personal politic, whatever that is. And people in America got sick of that, and so we began to slowly turn to manga because the Japanese don't care about that. All they care about is good storytelling.
Yeah. Well, but also at the same time, I agree with you, Gary, but I also like to think that the whole thing with woke culture has really just been the last 7 or 8 years. Not to say that it wasn't there before that, but I think that with the rise with corporate ownership, especially with DC Comics, when you look at everything that DC Comics went through, once the corporation that owned them decided that they were worth paying attention to. And look at what has happened to Marvel since they were owned by Disney.
Yeah.
Especially with a lot of people that, you know, I'm sure, Al, you know of people that at least, you know, were working for Marvel prior to that. And you probably have at least know of people that have since been working for Marvel since they've been owned. There's a difference in how things are done. And it's not the same way as it was before. And that has an effect on really the creative output of both companies. DC with just a slide that had been going on for years, and Marvel is just an immediate downward spiral in quality once Disney fully got their hands on everything. And now you have them basically running. You have pretty much Marvel answering to someone who was a fan, at least according to them, of the medium, but who's really makes his money and concentrates a lot of his time on film and TV. And I'm talking about Kevin Feige ultimately. That combination and working like that does not allow comics, in my opinion, to really achieve everything that it could achieve if you had people first and foremost that were fans of the medium and respected the IPs that they had, you know, were working on, instead of just randomly handing things out because somebody has a particular idea that they just want to communicate, and have no real love for Spider-Man or Iron Man or Captain America, and just continue to just write the way that they've always written when they're online emailing to their friends or in chat rooms, which is really what comics have become more like in recent years. It's just visual chat room banter is really what it is. And comics weren't like that before. They were well written. I'll let you speak out.
Well, yeah, I actually agree with you. I think what's going on now with Marvel and DC, the content is quite terrible. I think they're trying to push an agenda and indoctrinate their readers with their point of view. It's gotten really extreme. And it's not only the content of the work, but it's also their hiring practices. Because Marvel and DC will hire people based on their ethnicity or their pronouns or their politics. And that's what qualifies you to become an editor or a writer at these corporate-owned comics. And that hasn't always been the case. And it hurts everything because these people, you know, have they ever even read comics before? And they get hired as an editor for a publisher to, you know, oversee these books. And it's all, you know, quite terrible. I mean, when I was working at Marvel and DC and Archie, it's like it predates all this, you know, SJW sort of wokeness, and things were different back then. But yeah, everything now is kind of terrible. But again, I think it's a great opportunity for create your own work.
And
Yeah,
you're
that-
right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the same thing you were probably going to say, which is, it's independent comics are right now at one of the greatest periods of time for them because they were always overshadowed by the big two.
Mhm.
And let's not disclude IDW and Dark Horse and such, Boom Comics, all that shit. Because they're still out there. They're making shit too, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But the fact is, this is probably the best time to live as an independent comic creator, which is what you're doing. And I want to circle around to what you're doing right now, Al.
Yeah.
Because you've stepped away from working for other companies and are making your own stuff. But you just got, and I'm going to use the word very truthfully, fucked for your money over getting funding for your project. Let's talk about that. What is your project? What is your idea? Because you're going in an opposite direction. And, as a Christian, a devout Christian, you're wanting to make comics that cater to people of faith. But you also want to make it fun.
Correct. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, there are people in my life, teachers and comic book creators that have always really inspired me. So, like Will Eisner and Dave Sim, like those guys have always been great. And they always promoted, creator-owned work and self-publishing and doing your own stuff. And that's what I'm doing now. So, yeah, I mean, I had a very blessed career and I worked for, RGDC, Marvel, Sesame Street, Nickelodeon, and all those companies and dealt with Hollywood. And at the time it was quite a blessing. But now, yeah, I want to do my own work. And I've self-published and did creator-owned work during those days as well. But yeah, I'm self-publishing the Sword of Eden graphic novel series, and I have 2 graphic novels out, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Sword of Eden. Yeah, and it's a great opportunity to tell the stories I want to tell and write the way I want to write and draw and, give back to God and create entertainment that is fun. It's superhero, but it's fun, action adventure stuff, and has strong, very strong Christian themes, and it has the gospel message in there. And it's not woke, it's not anti-American, and it's wonderful. It's a huge blessing. So self-publishing those graphic novels, and people like Mike are very supportive, and my audience is great. I sell directly to readers on Amazon and eBay, and I have an online store, and I sell directly to stores as well. So I sell to comic book shops, I sell to traditional bookstores, I sell to Christian bookstores, and I distribute it through Diamond and ChristianBook.com. So you got to do all those things if you want to make a living in comics, and especially self-publishing your work. So yeah, it's a huge blessing, and it's a lot of fun, and I get to do what I want to do and give back to God, and it's amazing.
Now, what happened with this getting screwed out of your money thing?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting couple of weeks. Thanks, Mike. Because I told Mike all this
problem.
It was absolutely insane. I did this video. Actually, I think it predates the video. It does predate the video. There was a local nonprofit that helps artists if they're working in art, and it wasn't for a lot of money. And I reached out to them, and I probably should have done better research in regards to the kind of artists that they support. So I sent them a package, and I had to send them one of my graphic novels and some of my artwork and some references and a letter of recommendation, which Mike supplied for me, which was great. So thanks, Mike. And the woman was very happy with all the stuff she got. And she went to her local bookstore and comic book store and showed them my work and my graphic novel. And she loved everything. And at some point, and I've never dealt with these stores before, these particular stores, the bookstore actually did some research on me and was telling this woman, this nonprofit, that I am anti-gay and anti-alphabet people, and they were trying to cancel me. And I've been canceled before, and I've had, publishers and other people cancel me before, but I've never had like bookstores do it. So the woman from the nonprofit, she sent me an email and she asked me, are you gay? Do you support the gay community? And I was in the process of emailing her back, and then my phone rang, and it was her. And we had this lengthy conversation, and I didn't really get the opportunity to actually partake in the conversation too much. The conversation went on for like 20 minutes or so. And she felt, it sounded like she felt torn. Like she liked me. She really liked my work, but she told me that the nonprofit was not going to give any funds to an artist that was a Trumpster, and that they support the gay community and trans and all that kind of stuff. And she asked me if I support the gay community. And I told her no. And I was like, listen, like, I don't know why my politics has anything to do with me getting a grant. And she started yelling and she was saying, but it does, it does. And then, the conversation went on for like 20 minutes or so. And then she sent me an email saying that they were not going to supply me with a grant. It wasn't a big deal, to be honest with you, but I was just really surprised that, a bookstore was doing research on me, trying to cancel me, and that I couldn't get a grant because I voted for Donald Trump. And it was really insane. And then, because the thing is like, if you do that kind of stuff to them, they freak out. And another thing was like, I gave her a list of references, and it was various comic book creators, and she spoke to one of them, and he defended me, and he was great. And he actually got into an argument with her about a lot of this sort of woke stuff that's going on in not only our culture, but in the comic book industry. And his point was that, he asked her, do you think it's okay for a 15-year-old girl to get a mastectomy? And he just was just very livid about these things. So he was very supportive, and that was great. But so that's what happened. So I did this video where I was just saying, this is what's going on in the comic book industry. And this is not new news, of course. And this is the kind of stuff that's been happening to me in recent years. And people saw the video, and I was getting all these emails from other comic book stores, and they were telling me to, calling me a racist and a bigot and an anti-Semite, which was really interesting because they clearly aren't not reading my work. And one person told me that I should F off forever. And then one person told me that I am not a Christian and I'm not following the teachings of Christ. And if they actually read the Bible, I know it's insane. If they actually read the Bible, they know what God's will is on these things. But they're just hateful people. They got all riled up. And it was like at the same time after we had the presidential election, and all these people are upset, and they once had blue hair and now they're shaving their heads and they're flipping out and doing videos on TikTok where they're yelling and screaming and going crazy. And here's this Al Nickerson guy who's, a Christian and creating content that, isn't woke, and they're flipping out. And that's what happened. And I shared this with Mike. I don't know if I sent you an email or whatever, Mike, and then Mike called me. We talked about this, and then Mike did a video, and Mike has been very supportive. And yeah, so we're all, kind of like-minded on this stuff. But that's what's going on. That's what happens in the comic book industry. And that's what like a lot of the comic guys are going through or went through, where they're getting canceled because of their politics. And this stuff has been going on for a long time. But if you're
I told you I lost 2 jobs to it.
Yeah, and, I know. And this stuff does exist. And that's why it's really important to do your own work, control your own career and your own project.
Absolutely.
And not have to worry about gatekeepers. The problem is like a lot of these stores are hurting. These comic book stores, they're relying on Marvel and DC content. And, the majority of readers in the United States and Canada, they're young men. And they don't want to read this kind of garbage. They don't want to read how their heroes are turning gay and trans and all this crazy stuff. So they're not buying this material. And these comic book stores relying on books that are being published by Marvel and DC, they're suffering. So that's why it's important to work directly with them if you're a creator-owned independent self-publisher.
Now, I will point out that there's 2 levels to the way that they love to call people anti. And one of the ways is like if you're at a grocery store and they ask you if you want to give whatever to round up to the next dollar to some sort of charity, right? And you go, I don't want to. If they attack you and say, well, you're anti this charity, you would go, that's insane. I just don't want to support it. I'm not interested in giving it my money. That's different than being against it, but not in their minds, not in the way that they think. But they also use things like if you have a religious belief, okay, because Keith's Christian too. I'm Catholic Christian, but I'm what's referred to as agnostic, in that I believe, but I don't believe in certain things. And but I believe that agnostics were given our own saint. You know what saint that is, right, Al?
I'm not agnostic.
Thomas. Thomas is the patron saint for agnostics, because we want to believe, we see things, and we do believe fervently in them, but in other things we're like, I just have trouble understanding it, because I'm a science guy. I grew up in science. My dad was more devout than me, and I was like, how do you do it? It's like I have so much trouble with my faith. And but I still believe. I pray every day, multiple times a day. In fact, I was praying during the show.
Oh, I think I was too.
Mike would finish his story.
Wow.
Fine.
I just want to. I want to mention when you say Thomas, you're referring to the disciple.
Thomas, yes,
Right.
Doubting Thomas.
Right. So, yeah, doubting Thomas. So in John's gospel, after the risen Christ, and the other disciples were talking to Thomas, saying that Christ had risen, Thomas doubted that. Like Thomas said, you know,
he had to see it and touch it
him,
to
right.
believe it.
So what happens? So Jesus shows up. And then Thomas believes, and then Thomas says, and he refers to Jesus, my Lord and my God. So, and he believed. So he was no longer doubting.
But it's like I've always, but because of the empirical evidence, and so I've always said that I've always believed that God in his infinite wisdom is very forgiving for people like us that still try to live by the doctrine, live by, you know, as Jefferson would say, the red letters in the Bible, and live by those things and try to, you know, be as close to God as you can be as a person. And I do that every day. And I have my daily, I don't call it worship. I call it just, I go into prayer and I pray. But my prayers are funny, because even my priest said that one day. Because I told him, I said, I have a prayer every day that I raise my daughter Zoe, who Keith knows very well. And every day that I raised her when she was little, started out, please God, give me the wisdom to make the right decisions. Guide me in what I need to do today. And oh Lord, no matter what, please don't let me fuck anything up today. Please. Amen. And Father thought that was hilarious. He says, God will take you however you speak. And I said, I mean it. It's different than screwing up. When you F up, it's something serious. And I was terrified of effing up when I was raising her by myself. And so I've worked my faith as best I can, and I'm hoping that I make it in the end. I stopped rounding up. I'm not giving them money so they can get a tax credit. I give it to my church and my missions. There you go. Good girl, Penny. That's why Penny's awesome.
Yeah.
Saint Baby. Oh, shut up, Shinatsky. He's the bane of my existence, Shinatsky. I work with him. So Awesome One is here. Hey, what is up, my brother? It's good to see everybody. Of course, our good friend Jeebus is here. This month he is Colonizer Jeebus for Thanksgiving. Next month he will be I forget, is it
Holiday.
Krampus Jeebus.
Krampus Jeebus, that's it. Krampus Jeebus. He is our in-house troublemaker. We love this guy. I love him. I love him. And he's a big collector, dude. He buys toys and comics and shit. Great collector. So how many Backdoor Gary kids were kidnapped? Did he ever try rolling over to see if one was stuck under him? Number one, Colonizer Jeebus, go fuck yourself. And and for that, you get a backdoor video. So Martin, are you here? Or are you back in
I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm trying to be here. It's really difficult though.
You got to do better, Senator.
Flashback.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I was explaining I was explaining to Al before the show that Keith is what we refer to as a classic blue dog Democrat. We've talked politics for years, and not one fight. We've never been in one argument, have we?
No.
We haven't agreed, but we respect one another.
Yeah,
because you're an old school Democrat, a real Democrat. Because I used to be one of those. My dad and I both Irish Catholic Democrats, and we left it though because we were wiser than you, Keith. But
okay. Normally, we don't as we don't do the backdoor video here in this show. What we normally run is this.
We don't do that here.
But
we don't do that.
But
we don't.
For this being a special occasion, Jibus, there you
the idea of it going out the back door.
There you go. I'm only here because you're here. I wanted to make sure that you had at least one other comic professional in here with you that understands what we're talking about.
Well, thank you very much. I gotta say, knowing Gary is a total experience, and
listen to this, Al. Listen closely.
and I must say, out of all of my friends who are political, especially ones who are very right leaning, Gary has always been very good to me. He's always taken time to talk with me. And when we've had disagreements, it's more of a conversation than it is an argument, which I wish others would really adapt.
It's an intellectual discussion.
Yeah. Look, both of us feel smarter every time we have deep discussions because we learn something. And I think that really is the way to go. And I can't sit here and say that I've agreed with everything, although there are a few things I do agree with him about. I'm more of a moderate, really. Although I kind of
we tested. Remember, we took that test.
Yeah, we're both about.
There was this political test that had the 4 spectrums. Okay, and Keith and I were right next to each other. I was on the conservative side of the line, and he was on the liberal side of it, but we were really right next to each other, and it's like, that's our friendship. We're holding hands. But where's that video, Martin, of us when we're babies hugging each other? Where is that video?
I don't know. You deleted that video before I went.
Al.
I get part of the channel.
It's a video that somebody posted one day of this little white boy and this little black boy hugging it out on the street. And I grabbed that and I said, that's Keith and I when we were little.
You have been exposed by Awesome One.
I will tell you, if they did decide to spell it with a K, I might consider it.
He's right. It looks more fashionable.
It looks good. It looks more fashionable. Yeah,
it looks good that way.
It's awesome. Possible.
Wow.
I also want to say that normally I'm not here, and it's so cool to see one of my dearest friends in here right now. That is my buddy Zach's Gerber. The only other person that called me that out is comic colorist John Alderink, who worked for I forgot the name of that company out of Illinois that did digital coloring. Huge company. They worked for all the publishing companies, and he got a job with them. And I worked for them temporarily, and then I was like, no, I don't want to work for these guys. Because
I really hope they're not called.
I didn't like what they were doing with the digital art. I didn't like the direction they were going with digital coloring. Because I'm more of a traditional colorist.
Oh, all right, yeah. Sometimes, well, especially like in the early 1990s when they were doing lettering and coloring digitally. I think, sometimes colors would just go overboard with coloring and do a lot of airbrushing, which was
too much shaping going on. Yeah. And as an airbrush artist myself, I use the airbrush technique even in digital coloring.
Oh yeah,
but I don't go overboard with
exactly.
it. And that's my problem is they started going overboard, all the shiny, and it just got ridiculous.
Yeah, totally.
And
I understand what you're saying.
Heroic Age. Heroic Age was the name of the company in Illinois that did the coloring. And John Aldrich worked for them for years and just an incredible colorist and artist. And he gave me the nickname Gare Bear. And now Zach calls me that. So Zach's my buddy. Anyway, Keith, you were about to say something, man.
Yeah, I was about to ask Al. Look, since learning that you were going to be on the show, there is one question that I want to ask. I mean,
I'm ready.
Brace yourself, Al. Brace yourself.
How did you work it? I mean, was it something planned that you ended up working for MTV, Nickelodeon, and Sesame Street? I mean, how does one find themselves, working for all three of those at different times? But I mean,
right. Well, I started working in comics in 1994, and I was before talking a little bit about the speculator boom and how the speculator boom crashed, and then how it really affected the comic book industry and retailers and publishers. And yeah, I started working in 1994. The bubble kind of crashed in on itself, and publishers were canceling books. So I had to find work elsewhere. And I was living in Jersey City, and around that time, everybody wanted to do animation in the 1990s. There were several different networks and studios in Manhattan. So I just started getting work doing animation. I think the first company was probably MTV, and they had studios in Manhattan. And then Sesame Street is located in Manhattan, as well as Nickelodeon. So I was just bouncing around between those three companies when I was doing animation, and Marvel Studios as well. So yeah, when I couldn't find work doing comics, I got into animation, and then I started working back into comics again after that. So yeah, those companies were in New York. You just walk in, and a lot of these networks and studios wanted to do animation. Cartoon Network was doing a lot of great stuff at the time, creating new shows. Johnny Bravo and Dexter's Laboratory and all this great stuff. And MTV was doing animation, Beavis and Butthead and the Max, and and it was a wonderful time back then to do animation. So that's what I started doing, and it was fun. And then I worked at Sesame Street for 2.5 years, and I was working in-house as an animator. And when that ended, I just walked over to DC Comics and started working for them for 8.5 years, and then Archie Comics for 8 years. So everything worked out fine. But yeah, it was, these studios were local. You could walk in and find work, and that's what I did.
So now I'm thinking, by the time you worked for MTV, that was already after they had already done liquid television. So
yes, that's true. I only worked for MTV, I think, for like 6 months. And that was like 1996 and into 1997, and they were finishing up on Beavis and Butthead, and they were doing the Dennis Rodman show. And then I was an animator on the Dennis Rodman show, and that's how I first started working in animation.
Did you get to meet Dennis Rodman at all?
I did not. No, I met Mike Judge once. He was
nice,
the company's cafeteria, and then my buddy who worked on Beavis and Butthead since the beginning introduced me to Mike Judge, and he seemed like a really nice guy. And Sam Keith of the Max showed up once, and I have all these copies of storyboards and scripts and character designs from the Max TV show, and I was a huge fan of the Max. I just
of course,
the comic was fantastic.
And I'm supposing that you would do storyboarding. Is what you were doing for them, right?
Well, for MTV, I was inking animation, so I was doing finished
working on the cells,
artwork and inking, and well, it was on paper at the time. So so that's what I was doing at MTV.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it was fine.
And Sesame Street. I mean,
yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'm assuming that like a lot of us, you at least watched it when you were younger. So to find yourself working on Sesame Street had to have been kind of surreal. Had to have been, kind of freaky. I mean, I'd be freaking out, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when I was really young, I liked Sesame Street. I found it to be entertaining. But, Keith, with a lot of these companies, I was fans of these publishers and studios even when I was younger. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it's a job, it's still a job. You can enjoy it, and I was fine. But yeah, you had to be professional and do the work and get the job and keep the job and work to the standards that they wanted you to work. And yeah, it was a blessing. It was fine. And no, I can never do it again. I can't work for these companies ever again. I don't want to work for anyone else ever again. But yeah, at the time, yeah, it was great. So I had a pretty good career. I mean, I've had some problems with like trying to get paid royalties and get my artwork returned and stuff like that, but that's not too unusual in the comic book industry.
Yeah, I think Jack Kirby would definitely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, Kirby. The first time I ever heard anything about comic book creators' rights, I was in high school, and I got an issue of the Comics Buyer's Guide, which was like a comics newspaper, and they had a full page ad by several different comic book creators at the time, insisting that Marvel would return Jack Kirby's pages back to Jack Kirby. And so that's the first time I started realizing, how these publishers treat their writers and artists. And then, they had the Creators Bill of Rights in 1987 or so. And I was a, huge fan of that. And I listened and read a lot about creators' rights from people like Neil Adams and Dave Sim and Steve Bissett and Scott McCloud, and really became very much informed how things work in the comic book industry. But as I've gotten older, my opinions have strengthened. And in 2005, I wanted to have a conversation again about these issues. So I started talking to Steve Bissett and Dave Sim and Scott McCloud and those guys, and we had a conversation going in 2005 and for a few years where we were discussing these kinds of things and contracts and, the lawsuit between Todd McFarlane and Neil Gaiman over some of those characters. And it's a healthy thing to do because no one wants to talk about contracts in the comic book industry. No one wants to talk about page rates in the comic book industry. And if you're a young artist and you want to work in comics, you should be able to know how these publishers operate. Anyway, so yeah, but ultimately I would say just do your own stuff.
That's a conversation that has come up a few times with Jim Steranko, who I follow and who's had a lot to say about that, and various people that worked in the industry that he had met. But I got to say, first and foremost, congratulations on working for yourself.
Thank you.
I think that it does take something to be able to do that, especially given everything else that's out there and the history of comics, at least since I've been around. It's pretty much just been DC and Marvel dominating, with a lot of other various companies, occasionally becoming known enough to certain fans, Gold Key and Harvey and Archie Comics and others surviving off of basically what was left after the wreckage of Marvel and DC coming through and doing what they've done in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s. What are you hoping to accomplish with your comics outside of just the comics themselves? Are you aiming to do more as far as, go beyond and have, say, animation or movies or films? Or are you strictly just wanting to concentrate on comics?
Well, here's a couple of things. One is, I've dealt with Hollywood before and I've worked in animation. I love the art form of comics and sequential art. I love the medium. I love drawing and writing, and I used to love teaching about how to create comics. I don't think we need Hollywood to validate our art form by having Hollywood adapt our material into film or television. So that's really not my interest at all. Also, and in the late 1990s, a friend of mine and I, we were working with Saban Entertainment, which owned the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the Fox Family Channel, about an animated series that we came up with. So we signed an option-to-option agreement. Then we signed an option-to-purchase agreement with Saban Entertainment, and they had a year to decide whether they would want to greenlight the series. And in that time, we, worked on the script, and but after that, and we had to get a lawyer to, negotiate the contract, because at that point it was just really complicated. But after the year, Fox Family and Saban Entertainment decided not to greenlight the show. So you don't want to put your career in the position where other people have control over you. With that said, when I started self-publishing The Sword of Eden, I did talk to a couple of Christian networks about adapting The Sword of Eden into animation. And what had happened was they just kind of crunched the numbers, and then they realized it would be too expensive to do that. But also with Hollywood, like once you sign over those rights to a network or a studio or whatever, you lose control over it, and then they can do whatever they want with your material. Yeah, that's scary. But to answer your question, I have no interest in adapting The Sword of Eden into anything other than a graphic novel series.
I agree with you. I mean, this whole chasing Hollywood validation, to me, is the true root of a lot of the problems with the current comic book industry. There's way too many people that are trying to use comics as sort of a springboard onto some sort of a Hollywood career.
Yep.
Rather than being there for the love of the medium and the art of comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's crowded out a lot of people who would have had an interest, who have had dreams of being in the comics business and can't do it. Meanwhile, somebody decides, I'm going to write a Batman book because my boyfriend is a Batman fan, even though I have no idea who Batman is, and I'm just going to write his adventures in high school and try to sell that, which, again, to this day, just a combination of weirding me out and making me just mad about that DC would do that.
Yeah. Well, look, that Hollywood is populated by these assholes that claim to be comic fans.
Yeah.
That, like, Kevin Feige is one of the biggest phonies on the planet. It's like, oh, I read some 80s and 90s comics. That makes me a fan. Fuck off. Get a job. Same thing with that asshole at DC on TV. What's his name?
Oh,
the Fagula. I can't think of his name.
I was going to say James Gunn, but no.
Greg Berlanti is the biggest hunk of lying shit I've ever seen in my life, because a comic book fan wouldn't have done what he has done to DC.
Yeah.
And then there's that asshole that works for Berlanti and the CW, who is worked on the Green Lantern movie, and what an asshole that guy is. No, not Guggenheim, the other dude because he wrote the Green Lantern comic for a while. And I said, people have said, well, it was really good what he did in that. And I'm like, it was not good. Have you not read classic Green Lantern comics? That was good. What he did was average. What is that asshole's name? He was one of the guys involved with Stargirl too.
Oh,
the asshole I hate. I can't stand him.
Yeah, I could. He actually ran DC for a while before Walter
Jeff Johns. Thank you, Wolverine.
Yeah, Jeff Johns.
Thanks for being
Jeff
Keith
Johns.
today, Wolverine.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, Keith. As we get older, that retrieval system into that deep drawer of information gets a little slower.
Well, somebody cut a lot of the strings I had. So
every time
Jeff Johns, I cannot stand that guy.
Old out.
I don't know if you ever got to work with him, Al. I'm glad I never did.
No.
I just can't stand Jeff Johns. I really can't stand him. I think he's a terrible writer.
He wrote something. It was a Justice League and Justice Society crossover in the early 2000s, and which that I liked. I thought it was called Virtue and Vice. That I really enjoyed. I thought that was really good. But I think that's
I never got that one. Everything I've read of his, I haven't liked. So
I do want to say
I just don't like him.
I want to say
What's that, Al?
No, despite my crankiness towards Marvel and DC and all the Hollywood stuff that they're doing. And I don't watch any of the Marvel movies or DC movies or TV shows or anything like that. One thing I will say, though, is that since the popularity of these films about superheroes, I think it's created a greater respect amongst people in North America for superhero content. And if it gets more people to read comic books and superhero comics, I think that is actually a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There are two things that, going back to the whole manga thing, and
oh my god, I knew he was going to do this.
No. There are two things that current North American comics, Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Image and IDW, there are two important things that they're missing, okay? Which manga gets right, okay? First of all, when a manga is adapted to an anime, it always respects the creator and their story and what they've done whenever it's adapted to, like, say, an anime or even a live action movie, which they occasionally do in Japan, right? That's something that is not done anymore at Marvel, at DC, at any of these other, houses around North America that produce comics anymore. The second thing is, and this is why, generally, with manga, you get, short runs, sometimes they'll last like maybe 100 issues. Sometimes they'll go on for like decades. It really depends. But the thing is, the hero's journey. There is no more hero's journey much in mainstream comics here in North America anymore. There isn't. Nobody goes through pains and struggles or anything like that. Not much anymore, I would say, right? Because especially the way they write them now, women are always perfect and they're just doing everything right all the time. While most of the men superheroes are just stupid slobs or being replaced by indigenous gay people, like they're doing like with Hawkeye, for example, now, or something stupid. There's no hero's journey anymore. Nobody goes through these hard struggles or anything like that.
It's about activism is what it's about.
Yeah.
Now. They don't know how to tell stories, Mike.
No, they don't.
It's activism all the way.
Exactly. Well, it's like, this is the message I'm going to put, to hell with, going through pains and struggles and trying to become a better person. There's none of that anymore. And that's where our superhero-dom has left the building, right? Nobody goes through struggles. Everybody's just naturally perfect. And here's what I believe, and I'm going to shove it down your throat like a 6-foot-long schlong that I just bought at some,
I was hoping you wouldn't go there with that. Oh my god!
Well, no, gross, but I am because I know. But that's what they're pushing, because that's exactly what it represents now.
But it's also the fact that the concept of evil is something that they do not deal with because a lot of these writers don't understand it. It's why they it's a lot of misunderstood people that are doing bad things because X happened in their life or something happened.
Somebody got in front of me at the coffee latte line.
Some kind of a trauma in their past caused them to do this, and and not that there's anything wrong with trauma. People have experienced trauma, but there is such a thing as evil. There are some people that are just plain bad. And there's no trying to figure out what the good portion of those people are. The thing that I always enjoyed about comics, especially a lot of my early reading of Superman and Batman comics, is that there are just certain villains that are just flat out evil, and they revel in it. They love it. Go ahead.
Keith, I think you're being too polite. Yeah.
Only slightly.
It's not about the trauma or anything. We're talking about people who truly believe that their emotional status grants them carte blanche to do whatever they want to other people.
Yeah.
That is evil.
Yes.
Well, Magneto, Homo superior, right? Taking on this air that I'm better than you because I have these powers and I can do whatever I want with them. And even though he had his point of view of how things should be, going on with how mutants were treated and stuff like that. Nevertheless, he was still a villain, right? Because he felt he was superior to your average, human shlomo out there, right?
Yeah,
I gave him a license to be bad, basically.
I'm not even talking about a sense of superiority. I'm talking about, I'm angry. I have the right to wrong other people.
Oh yeah.
Your rights supersede other people's rights, and that's really look. I'm going to call okay, I'm going to use a word. Please don't take this the wrong way. Spade a spade. Keith chuckles. You hear that? Keith chuckles.
Yeah.
He chuckles.
Yeah.
But look, man, this is where I show my politics, because all of this wokeism, all of this stuff comes from one place. It's called Marxism. And Marxism is trying to root itself in this country. We are resisting it better than any other country right now. It really came close to taking hold in this country in a way that terrified me, because I started thinking, wow, I don't know if I'll ever be able to make a living under this kind of world. And they would quash me, crush me, and destroy me. And we know that, just like Al, they tried to cancel me a few years back because I took a shot at Zack Snyder. It was an honest and truthful shot. I probably shouldn't have done it, but fact is, I brought up the fact that, he makes a big deal out of his daughter committing self-deletion, but he raised her in what is that called, Keith, that belief system, the philosophical outlook system used in, I forgot the name of it. Nihilism. He raised a child in a nihilist home. Now, what do you think?
Gee, I can't imagine what would go wrong.
So they tried to cancel me. I got all these emails, Al, that were funny, and messages like, did you say this? And I went, yes, I did. Oh, and I said that. Oh my God. And I keep saying things. I said that. Oh, and I said that. And I just kept going, and they got tired of me, because what I learned is it's impossible to cancel somebody who doesn't give a shit.
God, genius.
Well, but I also think that there are way too many people that are currently within the business that are spending way too much time on social media rather than working on their job, which is creating comics. Whether you should be writing or inking, editing. Yeah, they spend more time being keyboard activists than they are just doing their jobs. And that is the thing. I mean, I cannot sit here and tell you, I can't even believe that someone like, say, Wally Wood would spend more time writing letters to the editor, being, PO'd at something that's gone on politically or socially, rather than spending time creating comics.
And, something else you hear in modern fandom is the use of punch-a-Yahtzee, right? Punch-a-Yahtzee. And it's like, the guys that coined that actually punched and killed Nazis. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Real ones, the real fascists, the real thing. You guys throw that around as a nickname for anything you don't agree with.
Right.
And the fact is, this woke crowd is the closest thing to fascism you will ever see outside of the Wehrmacht, the Third Reich. It's like these guys took from the book. Antifa takes all of their lessons from Marxism because they're Marxists.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They are actual fascists.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, no, you have to be right-wing to be a fascist. It got started in Italy, and guess what? No, he was a socialist. Just like good old Adolf was a socialist.
Right.
What the fuck are you talking about? You don't know your history.
They don't.
Well,
read a book.
Well, a lot of these kids today should be thanking their lucky stars that Harlan Ellison is no longer around, because he would be having a field day.
And that guy was a big old lefty too. He was a
and
liberal
it was
and a half, but he hated these motherfuckers.
Yeah.
You had a
I-
big smile on your face, Al. What was that about?
Harlan Ellison, I have a lot of respect for him. Harlan Ellison's. You mentioned Jim Steranko before.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
I love Jim Steranko.
He's a great guy. So
Awesome hair.
Yeah.
Again, Harlan to me is just the guy seemingly had no fear.
Hmm.
And when it came to discussing anything, I think one of the few people that seemed to match his ability to be able to just jump in with both feet and fist is Gary, which is another reason why I like him.
Because I just don't give a shit.
Yeah,
I care about people. Feelings. I tell people all the time, man, I hope this doesn't hurt your feelings, but I'm going to be honest here. By the way, speaking of honesty, what the fuck is wrong with you, Jeebus? Swear to God. I swear to God. I swear to everything holy in this world.
Why?
I want to know what is wrong with you. Read this, everybody.
Oh, wow.
How are we friends with you sometimes? I don't know why I love you so much.
Oh, wow.
Okay, sometimes you are one bean short of a burrito, my friend.
Wow.
I do like Mike's point about heroes fighting villains and heroes who are moral and villains who are just evil. And you see a lot of that gray area going on, a lot of superhero comics.
Yeah, they want to make everything neutral. Villains aren't really villains when you really look at them.
Well,
and it's like, this is one of the great thing about a good villain is that he has to believe in what he's doing. He has to believe that it's the right thing to do. And it's because he's blind to something that makes him the bad guy. And it's okay for them to be the bad guy and to die. And people don't want to do that anymore. That's why Disney started making all the villains all of a sudden the tragic, misunderstood heroes of the story. Maleficent. It's like, oh, fuck off with that. I didn't want to see those movies. Garbage.
And again, a good example of that is current Marvel. They've decided to have Magneto be now the leader of the X-Men.
What?
Yeah, it's stupid.
Yes.
That is so
Yeah. He's not only the leader.
retarded.
They have a special chair that he sits in because he no longer has use of his legs. And
oh God!
And
I was done.
Serious?
I was done
What?
when they made Captain America say "Hail Hydra." I didn't want to read Marvel anymore. I was done.
It's Jack Kirby and Joe Simon would be spinning in their graves if they knew that they turned their character into a crazy Nazi socialist.
Well, yeah.
And the ironic thing is, if they went into
Xavier,
Marvel, we
literally.
resurrected them, brought them back, they would go into Marvel and just start punching writers and artists.
Yeah.
Because
Siegel
they
and
know a
Schuster-
Yahtzee when they see one.
Siegel and Schuster would be worst because after what they did to Superman by having him, basically get violated several times for a story.
Yeah.
That right there to me was the limit. I mean, it's just, how do you even write something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
you got to have something deep in your psyche that visualizes that kind of stuff, or you've dabbled in it, or you're watching it or something like that, to be able to want to write that in a comic book, much less a Superman comic book. You have to be beyond into freaky stuff, more freakier than Chris Claremont probably ever was into, to be able to write that kind of crap in a comic book.
Yeah, that to me was just that was really the limit for me to have him have a kind of PTSD from having been violated multiple times over the course of, I think, almost a year.
Yeah.
8 months.
And 8 months. And I mean, it's just that to me is just I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So the state of the union for comics is that In the independent world, it's going strong. It's doing well. In the still corporate realm, it's crap. It's just crap. I don't bother talking about it much anymore. It's like I hit a point where I just don't even want to talk about it anymore. It's because all that's going to come out of my mouth is negative shit.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting because we mentioned Wally Wood and Harlan Ellison and Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and another gentleman that comes to mind is Steve Ditko, and he would not put up with this kind of garbage. And he was a very principled man, and he believed that heroes should be heroes and villains should be villains. And I admire Steve Ditko for many reasons, and that's one of them.
He doesn't get talked about enough. Steve Ditko was really he is the idea principled man, in my opinion. Because I got to tell you, with what he had going on, if somebody had been sending me checks for years, I probably would have cashed a few. The very fact that he never cashed any of those checks, wow. I mean,
I would recommend a few years ago, there was a biography that came out called Ditko Shrugged. And I would absolutely highly recommend Ditko Shrugged. It's a great biography on Ditko. It's supported by the Ditko family, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's fantastic.
I may have to check that out.
Yeah, Ditko Shrugged is great. There was another book called True Believer, The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee by Abraham Reisman, which is a bio on Stan Lee and talking about who Stan Lee really was. That's another great book that I would recommend if you have an interest in comics history.
I gotta say, it's a complicated thing when it comes to Stan Lee. I do like him. I grew up, he was Uncle Stan to me. And he was someone who was the ultimate carnival barker / storyteller. So given a lot of the things that I've learned over the years, though, I can truthfully say it's a complicated relationship I have with Stan Lee at this point as a comic reader and fan, I really cannot see his story being something that could easily be turned into a movie. You really can't. You can't do that. A television miniseries, maybe, but a movie, you couldn't do that. I mean, and not heavily favor one side of his story over the other, which would be unfortunate and not very truthful,
Yeah, there's another book.
We're seeing some. I'm sorry, Mike. I just want to throw this in. We've seen some other people because you brought up some important points, but there are guys now that are trying. They've waited till people have died, and now they're stepping up their game to take claim of having worked and helped create things when they actually really didn't. And Roy Thomas is one of those fuckers. His claim to Wolverine, because he said, "I think we should make Wolverine Canadian."
That idea. Don't make any. That's awful. How dare you?
Yeah, because nobody gives a shit about Canada. It's not even a real country.
Because the origins of Wolverine is actually addressed in the Ditko Shrugged book, where they talked and they use quotes from Roy Thomas and Roy Thomas and John Romita and Herb Trimpe and Len Wein, right? So they contributed to the creation of Wolverine.
In the end, though, when you look at it, because I showed this to Keith about a year ago, I think it was, the video out there that shows the Marvel fan magazine that Marvel published with fan art. Do you remember that back in the 70s? That had a drawing of Wolverine before there was a Wolverine.
Who drew the drawing?
A fan.
Oh.
And it said that he was Canadian. He had claws. The costume was pretty much the same stuff. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, holy shit, a fan made that. Remember that, Keith?
I think I do. Wouldn't that have been an issue of Foom?
Is that what it was called? I forget the name of it. I remember it as a kid.
Yeah, I think it was Foom.
Foom magazine.
Yeah, I think it was about
published by Marvel.
1968.
And it had the Wolverine in it before they ever created the character. It was called the Wolverine.
Yeah.
Don't look that up, Al. It's kind of shocking when you see that. And it's like, well, who inspired whom?
Yeah, it's weird. Like the Roy Thomas thing. Yeah, I've heard him make claims recently because a lot of these IPs they're making and generating hundreds of millions.
He wants
of
a piece of the action.
You know?
Exactly. He wants that 1 or 2%. You know, and I get it, but that's disingenuous to say, well, I suggested this idea. It's like, you know what, motherfucker, the writer of that and the artists are the creators. That's who did it.
Well,
you know,
it's convenient now that they're all dead.
Finally getting his credit.
Right. They've all the three other gentlemen have passed. Yeah.
So it works out conveniently. There's nobody else to argue the
Conveniently.
point.
There's that word I was looking for. Conveniently.
Yeah.
I mean, as a fan of Marvel Comics, I think I should get a little piece of that because I was a big fan of the Wolverine character, and me buying all those books over the years.
I'm the one who okayed it, so I'm clearly a co-creator. You know?
Yes,
he took Stan Lee's job. You know, I get that, but Jesus Christ, you know, even Stan Lee has more, I don't know what to call it, decency than to claim that. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, it's again with Roy Thomas. I really hope he's able to sleep at night because it is so. I
hope he doesn't sleep at night. I hope Monkey Jeebus goes to his house and just rattles cans outside his window. I'm Stan Lee. The ghost of Stan Lee.
Hey, true believer. This is Stan Lee. And I just say, Excelsior! I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Cha-cha-cha.
What did you think of the show so far, Al? I'm curious. Are you having fun?
I am. You're giving me the opportunity to be cranky about things, so that's nice. Although I would like to start talking about things that we do like or how we make things better. And
that's what we try to do.
Oh, okay.
We do.
Yeah.
So this last half hour, we're going to talk about, you know, puppy dogs and merry-go-rounds and all the
no, well, we're not gay.
Well,
so.
Now,
hey, I might be. According to the chat, I'm a little gay.
Is
happy.
What have you seen though in corporate? Let's start with, since we've been ragging on corporate comics. What have you seen that is actually kind of positive in your mind in recent corporate comics that you do like?
Nothing.
Okay.
No, and I'm being like, I don't buy anything new anymore. Like I don't buy new comics anymore, you know?
Yeah.
But there's good stuff out there. You know, independent material. I think that's those creators we should support.
And I agree with you. I mean, it is, in the end, it really is about supporting more of the independents, because I think there's you're closer to the true intent and vision of the creators rather than having characters and stories that seemingly pass through so many corporate hands nowadays. Probably so many lawyers look at everything. I mean, everybody's already figured out all the different ways to take advantage of an IP. And at least with independent, it is, I think, still about telling good stories and reveling in the art form, which I really think should be celebrated even more than what we do, because the art of comics is something very special. And I think in this country, we need to celebrate that more than just, you know, a day or two here out of the year. So many people have come through. They've worked in the business. There's a lot of names that fans should be really more familiar with than they are, you know. especially Marvel fans who probably aren't familiar with a name like Flo Steinberg.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there are a
Bill-
lot of names. Oh, go ahead.
Bill Finger's getting a lot of attention lately.
Yep. Bill Finger, Jerry
Yeah.
Robinson.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, Jack Kirby, Will Eisner.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys.
There's
Yeah,
a lot
it
of
was a real treat to learn about Bill Finger finally getting the love he deserved for Batman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel very happy for his family and for his granddaughter, especially.
Yeah.
She occasionally attends a lot of conventions and still has a lot of people that walk up to her and want to shake her hand and tell her stories about how, you know, her grandfather's creation. In my opinion, I still believe that Finger deserves really the credit.
I agree.
Well,
think
the
the
thing
Raven-
is, what we covered on Tuesday over on my
Yeah.
channel is his
Yeah.
granddaughter has a GoFundMe out to get Bill Finger a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and she's trying to raise money for that.
Wait. So, oh yes, because Bob Kane has a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Exactly.
Oh heck yes, he
Yeah.
definitely deserves one.
Oh yeah. So, you know, because looking at the original Bob Kane idea for Batman, it's
Yeah.
like, wow. You know, he just looks
Well,
like a circus tightrope walker with just, you know, like a couple of bat wings on. And then, you know, looking at how Bill Finger kind of enhanced it to,
Yeah.
you know, essentially the Batman we know today. It's like, you know, wow. That's I'm glad he did what he did. So,
well, I mean, but that's the power. That's the main reason why I think Bill deserves a majority of the credit in
Oh, yeah.
how they credit all of that. I think it should read Batman created by Bill Finger based on an original idea by Bob Kane.
by Bob Kane, yeah. Yeah. You know.
That's the fair way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not really like Bob did too much else outside of that. You know, except have a good lawyer write a contract for DC Comics that would give him credit. But,
Yeah.
you know, again, decades of enjoyment by people around the world for that character. And it really it makes seem like it's easy, but it isn't, to come up with a character that people can really gravitate towards and have,
Yeah.
you know, be so deeply invested in. And gosh, when you think about it from the aspect of being an independent comic creator, just getting a steady group of people to come in and read what you have on a monthly basis, to be able to establish a relationship with readers. I think that's part of the reason why Marvel was able to do what it did. You know, Stan Lee treating, you know, becoming a carnival barker in a way, as a way of offsetting what DC was doing and the amount of money that DC had versus the fact that Marvel didn't have as much money. You know, Al, do you find yourself being that interactive with your fans of your work who buy, you know, your comics, or are you using another method in order to, you know, get the word out there and establish a relationship and community?
My readers are very supportive, and when I do signings and when they order my book, they are quite wonderful, very flattering, which is very nice, and yeah, it's great. I don't think I've had any problems with any of the readers or anything, but yeah, they've always been quite wonderful and very supportive. And you know, especially now, if I have to sell a book to them directly, either on eBay or Amazon or on my online store, I know how things are now, so I want to make sure that they get the most for their purchase. So I'll include signed limited edition prints and some signed Xeroxes of my artwork. Whenever somebody orders a book, I'll sign the book as well. And yeah, it's great. And my readers are quite wonderful. What's even more very interesting and wonderful is, when I hear from other comic book creators who have
Mhm.
read The Sword of Eden or The Sword of Eden Shinobi, and I think it was maybe like 2 months ago. I mentioned him before, but Dave Sim did a video, and he was saying some really great things about the new book, The Sword of Eden Shinobi, Volume 2. He was really saying some really great stuff about that graphic novel, and he's been very supportive of Volume 1 as well. But the neat thing about Dave is that he was just like really analyzing The Sword of Eden Shinobi. And it sort of reminded me, because of what Mike was saying before, how you should have superhero stories where there's a hero and a villain, and that the villain loses and the hero wins, and the heroes are very moral characters, and the villains are just evil. And Dave really got that from reading The Sword of Eden Shinobi, and he was really analyzing it and stuff, and it was great, and it made me sound a lot smarter than I really am, and it was quite encouraging and wonderful. So my readers are very supportive, and they're great, and they're people that read comics, and they're people that are Christians who might not read comics, and they've always been very supportive, very very fortunate.
Well, now, which of the characters that you've created for Sword of Eden would you say? Oh man, how should I put this? In coming up with the idea for this, which of your characters would you say was the easiest one to create, and which was the hardest one to create? Or did it all just flow?
No, well, some of the characters have appeared in print prior to the Sword of Eden graphic novel, the first one. The hardest. Sometimes it's kind of easy, sometimes not so easy. The lead character, Rebecca Stern, in The Sword of Eden, that came about quite easily. I wasn't really trying to come up with like specifically, a female character, or specifically a character who was Jewish. It just sort of like happened, so sometimes, it works out pretty well. I don't think I've had any. Sometimes, like with names of characters will come really easy. Sometimes not so much. But mostly it's me just trying to tell stories that I really would want to read myself. Where, exactly, and certainly, I'm working on Volume 3 right now. It's called The Sword of Eden, Cry Vampire, which reintroduces Count Orlok from the original Nosferatu film, the black and white horror film.
Way cool.
Yeah, and he actually made an appearance in The Sword of Eden Volume 1 for like 11 pages, because at that point in the story, I wanted to show how this young superheroine was growing as a superhero. So I wanted to have this like really short fight in the first volume. So I was like, I'll just throw in Count Orlok. And actually, that whole sequence ended up being 11 pages out of a 220-page graphic novel, which was not really my plan. So what I wanted to do with that character, Count Orlok, is to say that vampires are evil. They're monsters. They should not be characters to look upon fondly or nice. It's really my being very critical of works like the Vampire Diaries or Twilight, or that craziness where they make vampires out to be like really nice guys, and all the young girls want to date them, which is quite terrible. So villains are villains, like kind of what Mike was saying before about Magneto, and Count Orlok is a villain, and he's a vampire and a monster, and that's really what I'm doing with the third volume of Sword of Eden.
Now, where do you ultimately want to take all of this with the Sword of Eden? Are you wanting to just get this to some big, kind of like all-encompassing, say, oh man, what's the name of that series again? Are you wanting to build this up to be something along the lines of, say, Crisis on Infinite Earths type level? Or are you just wanting to just fill out the universe and have the characters continue and entertain for, until you run out of stories, basically?
I don't think I have a big scheme or a big plan like that. I just wanted a self-published work. I wanted to write and tell the stories that I wanted to write, and tell. I wanted to share the gospel message in the work. I wanted to create content for Christians and non-Christians in regards to Christians, to create content where they're going to read the graphic novel and not feel like they're compromising God's principles, where they're not going to be insulted. And for people who are not saved, have the gospel message in there, so they can consider the gospel. The interesting thing is, like, initially I was trying to figure out who is my audience. Like, is it the sort of secular comic book store reading audience, or is it the church? And it ended up being both, So the big scheme. I just want to continue working on the Sword of Eden graphic novel series and keep doing that. I don't have a interest in, again, dealing with Hollywood or expand the book further than just me drawing my own little graphic novel series.
Fantastic. And the reason why I asked,
I got to tell you, man.
That seems to. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just, I got to tell you, man, it sounds good. It sounds good. There's a niche out there for everybody, and there are tons of Christians out there that love comic books. So clearly you've got a niche out in this, in your audience. What you have to do now is, at this point, as I see it, is grow that audience.
Well, that's,
or at least make them aware of the kind of content that is out there that they can read and enjoy. So that's why I do these wonderful interviews with you guys, and I plug my book, and I talk about theswordofeden.com and going there and purchasing and reading the Sword of Eden graphic novel series. So even people that I know, they were kind of like, the second book's out already. I'm like, yeah, it's been out for a few months now. So it's getting the word out.
Wow. I gotta say, wow. I mean, this is a lot further than I would have ever gone with some of my ideas. And again, talent and just combining all of this stuff. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And God is good to me. So I'm very blessed.
Amen. Let me at least also ask this. What was the best response to any issue that you've ever had? And what's your best-selling issue?
Well, in regards to my work made for hire career, I don't know what the best-selling work I've ever done. It's weird because, like, I noticed when I was selling original artwork, there are different groups of people that like different sorts of things. Like, there's a very interested group of readers who love all the ElfQuest stuff, and they would just want to buy all the ElfQuest original artwork that I had worked on that I was selling on eBay. And then there are the guys that want to purchase the Justice League Adventure artwork that I worked on. So there's sort of different little groups of people. I've had an incredible response and feedback from readers of the Sword of Eden graphic novel. And I got an email or a message, I think like 2 weeks ago, from a young Christian artist who wants to work in comics and create his own Christian graphic novels. And he was extremely flattering. So stuff like that always makes me very happy.
Wow.
So and Mike read the graphic novels too, and Mike's been very supportive. So you can ask him.
Mike Barron?
No. Me.
Oh, this Mike. Yeah, fuck
yeah.
Yeah, that Mike.
I'm sorry.
You ought to show your stuff to Mike Barron. I love Mike Barron. He's a good friend of mine.
Mike Barron and Steve Rude and their work on Nexus, fantastic, great stuff. And
I'll tell you another devout Christian artist friend of mine is Graham. What a deeply religious family. I love the Graham family. I knew that I was good friends with him when his wife followed me and we became friends. Because she likes my sense of humor for some reason. But I don't know. We should begin the wrap up for this. So where do we want to go with the rest of this interview?
Well, I am interested in asking this. Given what you've said about Hollywood, look, let me at least ask this, because at some point, in your head, you had to have at least asked yourself this question. If a studio came to you, an independent studio came to you and said, we want to, turn this into a film, which particular character do you think would be the one that would be, which would you pick? Which character would you pick to be the focus of a film if someone were to come to you and offer you money?
Are we talking like a secular studio? And this is all hypothetical, by the way.
Hypothetical. You know what? Let's say yes, secular. Let's go with that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of characters that come to mind. If it was just focused on one character, there's a new character in the second graphic novel, The Sword of Eden Shinobi, which I introduced, and he's only in like 4 pages. He's called Dareduck, and he's based on the original Daredevil character that's in the public domain. And this Duck character takes over the reins of being Daredevil. So he is called Dareduck. So I know Mike likes that character. And that might be kind of interesting animated series. But again, I'm not really that interested. But even when I was interested, I was talking to Pureflix about doing an adaptation of The Sword of Eden, the first volume. And I wrote a screenplay and I was talking to them about it. And it was huge nightmare. I don't know. There's another character called Ninja Spider, and he's a former ninja, and he became a superhero. And then, he seems like a lot of the young male readers tends to like that character because he's kind of really focused on, action and adventure and that sort of thing. And Rebecca Stern, she's a 16-year-old Jewish girl who starts her career off as a superhero and thinks she's doing God's will by beating up villains and fighting demons and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of different characters in there.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, thank you. But it's a lot of fun.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be.
Well, exactly. See, that's the thing. Because, especially because when I was teaching, I would, I think there are a lot of people that like the idea of being a comic book creator, but they really don't have an interest in either drawing or putting the effort in or any sort of that. So you got to really love it. And I remember one of my students, one of my teachers from college, Gene Colin, he would talk about how you need to be drawing 2 hours a day, and you need to be loving doing this stuff, or you should just go home. And I had some really great teachers. Will Eisner was a teacher, Harvey Kurtzman, Erwin Hasen. And I think in Gene's class, we actually went to Neil Adams, his studio, Continuity Graphics or Continuity Comics. And when we took a trip over to Neil's studio, it was neat because Neil had us, the whole class, and we were visiting. He had us all in this office room with this huge table and office chairs and everything. And he had us all sit down. And Neil, if you ever talked to Neil or had an opportunity to meet him or read any of his interviews, Neil was a straight shooter. And Neil said to all of us young, college students who wanted to work in comics, and he said, most of you guys will never make a living working in the comic book industry. And I was just because it's not easy. And what he was saying was it's not easy. And working in comics.
Yeah, it's only around 7% of all comic professionals, artists or writers, that make a decent living, that don't have to subsidize.
Wow. All right. Yeah, so Neil was right. And it was an eye-opener. And it made me realize if I really want to do this, I gotta love doing it. And here, there you go.
Wow.
And you gotta just keep at it. And you got to understand the business side of things. So you got to understand work made for hire. You got to understand contracts and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of that I did not learn when I was in college. I kind of learned the hard way.
Wow. I mean, amazing. Amazing. Does anyone else have any more questions for the main man, Al Nickerson?
No, I'm not the main man.
Because I posted the link to your store.
Okay.
What is the best way to get your books? Is to go to the website, right?
Yeah, go to theswordofeden.com, and that'll take you to my online store. But Volume 1 and Volume 2 are also on sale on Amazon as well and eBay. So yeah, some readers,
if they order directly from you, are they able to get it signed or anything like that?
Absolutely. Any order that's through me will be signed, and we'll include some free signed Xeroxes. And if I'm running out of limited edition prints, so I have one print left. Because when I started self-publishing the Sword of Eden, I think I had a total of like 5 different prints, and I'm all out of stock of all of them except for the new one. So, yep, and that's fun. That's great. So I very much enjoy doing that as well.
Outstanding. So I guess we can go ahead and start wrapping up, Keith. Mike, anything else you want to talk about here with this? Well, we got
Geez, no. I don't know. I do want to say, thanks for letting me God, how should I put it?
Michael was very helpful with designing part of the logo for the Sword of Eden Shinobi. Which Mike is a wonderful graphic designer. Yeah, so that part of Shinobi, Mike came up with that. Because I actually had created that part of the logo, and Mike reached out to me, and he's like, hey, I have this idea for designing the Shinobi, there's a little plug for Mike in there, title, logo. And I said, no. I was like, I'm not I don't like working with anybody anymore. Don't send me anything. I don't want to work with you.
Oh, well, I'm not the only one. Holy crap, to hear you say that, Al. It's like I've rejected so much work. I would rather go hungry than to work with assholes anymore. Real assholes.
Well, so what happened? So Mike designed the Shinobi logo, and he emailed it to me, and it was so good I couldn't say no. So thank you, Mike. No, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah.
I mean, I just want to say thanks for that, opportunity, even though I came across as a stalker. So there we go.
Yeah, you got to stop doing that.
Yeah, I know.
No,
I gotta tell you,
it was much better than what I had created, and I'm very happy with that. So yeah, on the inside front first page in the credits, I acknowledge Michael's contribution to the logo.
Wow, fantastic!
Yeah, no,
That's
I mean it's surreal, when somebody like with all the work that you've done, Al, and I mean, knowing Gary, that's worked at IDW, and talking to a bunch of other people, like Hungry Boy.
Because Michael forgets that I'm a 25-year graphic designer, award-winning graphic designer, and he gives me advice on a design I did recently, and I'm like, no, there was a reason I did that, Mike.
I get it.
Teased him over it.
I know. But no, it's surreal, because I mean, I look at you guys as I don't want to say giants, but bigger players in the field, for people that I know at least. And it just seems, rather surreal that, you get your name in a graphic novel that comes out. It's like, this is like really, really cool, and that's why I'm just trying to work diligently myself to up my game, because I want to put out my own comic. I want to be able to tell stories and stuff like that, because like you guys, inspired by stories that came out through DC or Marvel from ages ago, and appreciating good stories and good versus evil kind of stuff, and all these fantastical journeys that all these heroes went on. I want to be able to do that kind of stuff. I mean, that was stuff that I did back in the 90s with a bunch of other nerds when we put out our own fanzines and stuff like that, right?
I always suggest people that want to do that kind of stuff, though, Mike, to not just rely on the stuff that they fan out about, but to go back to some of the originals that inspire so much more. Classic literature, classic films, You know, just go back to, because there's so much material there that's, you know, still you could use today, because as we know, there's no such thing as an original idea.
No,
what
that's
there
true.
are original ways of telling that idea.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to find, that niche where you enjoy something. That's why you notice I focus mostly on military themed science fiction, horror, because I know military stuff. It's my life. But you know, you find that thing that you love and you do it. And for me, it was a mixture of two things, Al, because I'm a musician. I'm a, you know, professional musician. I've worked in studios, done a lot of worked with bands, and I compose music for films. And you know, it's like, I did that for me though. I didn't want to make music for money. I wanted to do that because that's where my passion lies. I love doing artwork, but it's not my passion. I'm just really good at it, and I enjoy it. And I think that that's important, is to make a decision sometimes. If you're gifted in multiple ways, find the one thing you know you can make money at and do that one, because it's not really work if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's got to be fun. But for me, my big release is through my music. And I do need to bring this up at the end of the show, Keith, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on today, is I'm releasing my first album in quite a few years of music that'll be coming out December 5th. This is the album cover that he wanted to give me advice on, Al. It was really funny. Right here. You can't see the logo down at the bottom, or the title at the bottom, because the ticker is going, but it's called Songs of Love and Other Tragedies. It'll have a minimum of 24 songs. So I'm still producing some right now. I'm not sure what all is going to go under, but it's going to be a minimum of 24 songs on the album. And I go by the name Cohen's Ghost, by the way. That's the name up at the top. And Mike was like, maybe you should make the logo more legible and bring it out a little, bring some of the shadow out. I said, it's a ghost.
The outline. The outline.
Yeah, the outline is also dropped down.
Yeah, I know, intentional now. Yeah,
to make it semi-transparent, because they're ghost songs. And
I'm so nitpicky.
You are just such a pain in my ass, but I love you anyway.
I love that cover, by the way. I think that's a great cover. No, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I'm a fine artist as well. I do paintings. I do book
covers, was all digital?
Movie posters. I paint digitally, yeah. It's still, I use the traditional method. I just don't have to clean my fucking hands anymore.
It's just a different tool. Yeah.
And I don't have to clean my Pache airbrush anymore. And god damn, that was, excuse me for my language, that made me so angry after a while. I got so sick of cleaning my airbrush. And getting ink, because if you're an inker, an artist, you have ink on your hands all the time.
Yep.
And I got tired of that. I'm what you call it, OCD, germaphobe. I began drawing with rubber gloves, which is really a weird way to draw, in my opinion. And because I didn't want to get ink on my hands anymore whenever I had to ink. So when I felt Photoshop, it was in 2011. Photoshop finally had brushes that I felt would allow me to do inking properly. I went totally digital. Graham Nolan followed in suit, by the way, because he liked what I was doing, and he, being a far better inker than I am, started doing all of his inks digitally. Almost all of them. But before we go, I want to give a sample of one of the songs that I just got back from being mastered, and I'm going to play a little bit. Al, I'm curious what you think of this song. This is a song about the last time all my best friends and I were together. Many of us have died. Most of us served in the U.S. Army or the Marine Corps. And this song is dedicated to my childhood friends.
Days of childhood, before we have to face the world.
That's the new song. I just got back. Mastering these songs is a pain in the butt. That's all I got to say.
I like the message. There was a movie in the 80s called The Dead Poets Society. And there
Yeah, I
was
love that film.
Carpe
It came out
Diem.
in 91, I think, 91,
Something like
92.
Yeah, maybe. But they
I was in the Army. I remember that.
yeah. So one thing that the Robin Williams character was talking about to his young students was Carpe Diem, which is Latin. It means to seize the day. So yeah, absolutely. Appreciate what you have now and enjoy what you have now because you're not always going to have it.
Yeah, and it's like because I'm still close friends with all of them, except for, of course, clearly my friends that passed away, and we still stay very close, and we talk about it. It's like, oh my gosh, a new set of pain started today. This whole getting older thing sucks. We need to get those empty, hollow husk clone bodies that we can transfer into so we can be young again. Youth is wasted on the young, as they say, because you think you got all the time in the world.
You do.
Yeah.
And that's what that song's about.
No, I love the message of that song. That's absolutely fantastic.
I think you would actually like a lot of the songs on there. I think there's even a song that talks about faith.
Oh, all right. So do you have a website?
Yes.
You want to plug your website?
I gotta look it up.
Oh, all right. I do want to say one thing. Mike Rancor Steve says hi.
Oh, yeah.
So hi, Rancor Steve. Thank you for being
that's also for Gary.
Oh,
too.
that's my buddy Rancor Steve. Mike's my friend. Yeah,
I
love Rank.
Yeah.
He's a funny dude. I hang out with him because he does a manly show about being real men, and I jump on there because it's tough, man, in this world right now to be a real man. I swear.
Oh yeah.
We're toxic, man. We're toxic, man.
Well, they did their best to try to emasculate society, and now they're going after women now, and yeah, it's all quite evil.
Right now, you can actually go to my YouTube channel. I'll just put it in the private chat. And I think I'm not sure if that has. Yeah, it's got my website. I'll give you that one too. So it's in there. And I'm going to drop the album at midnight of technically the 6th. I say the 5th because it'll be at midnight, but it'll actually be the 6th when it drops. And I'm hustling right now because we talked about this earlier. Multitasking as a creator. I do artwork, I do design, I do music, I do writing, and it's just this channel is exhausting for me, which is why I had to simplify and streamline it to where now I just simply name a film and we're going to do that. And all I got to do is for 2 hours talk about a movie that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to do that because Keith and I are encyclopedic people. We have vast amount of useless trivia in our head, and we found a use for it by doing this channel. It works. It works, my friend. It really works. I'd like to hang out with you sometime and just talk, just you and me, shop about some of the cool people we worked with.
Oh yeah.
I feel so blessed to have worked with some of the people I've gotten to work with. My first pro gig was with Chuck Dixon. And I learned something. If you become friends with Chuck Dixon, you're going to become friends with Graham Nolan. It's just, they go together. It just happens that way.
Yeah,
I'm friends with both those bastards.
Yeah, because I don't know them. I've never met them, but they seem like really great guys.
I'm friends with also Mike Barron. And people go, how good of friends are you with Mike? I said, he was on Lorena's channel doing an interview. And while he's interviewing, we're privately chatting with each other. And I kept telling him, tell him that Chuck Dixon is the model for Florida Man. It'll be funny. And start making up stories about Chuck Dixon. It'll be great. Talk about how he wrestled an alligator once.
Oh my God. Did you really?
Yeah, Mike will tell you I did that. I really did that. It was funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of jerks in comics, but yeah, I've met many great men in comics, and again, who are either teachers or people that were helped me out or gave me advice. And there are some really great men still in the comic industry.
Absolutely. And one of them that had a huge impact on me was Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil, because back in the 80s, I actually tried out for Marvel and DC. And I got a form letter from Marvel printed. And Denny O'Neil wrote me. And the only reason why I didn't go to work for them is because back in the 80s, you had to live in New York if you wanted to work for the top two. And I had a kid. I was a dad at 18, and I could not just drop my kid and leave him and go to New York or move my family there. So I was torn over not being able to go to work for DC in particular, because I'm a Marvel fan, don't get me wrong, but DC was it for me. I loved Batman. He was like my favorite comic character of all time. And I always wanted to draw for Batman. And in fact, I've done quite a few drawings of Batman, how I would have drawn him, which is more realistic, less robotic looking than what Christopher Nolan did, but it made more sense in the design. Enjoying the podcast. Thanks, guys. Desert Truth, welcome to the show. Hope you like and subscribe, man. Stick with us, because you'll find we're full of a lot of things, not just shit.
Yeah, don't let Gary scare you.
I can be scary to some people, but once they get used to me, they find me amusing. Denny O'Neil impacted Gary's backdoor, confirmed. Colonizer Jeebus. Thank you, Colonizer. You are a bastard of a friend. I love you, man.
Was this when Danny O'Neil was an editor at Marvel back in the 80s?
It was when he was at DC.
Oh, so then
when I tried out for I was back. I think he was still working on Batman, but he was also like in charge. And I wanted to be part of that bullpen. I was just like, oh my God, I would love that. But then when the reality kicked in, I realized I can't go there. I can't go there. And he wrote me the nicest fucking letter I've ever gotten from anybody. I lost it in my divorce with a lot of things. All my photos, all my family photos.
Really?
A letter from Denny O'Neil. But I did become friends with him on Facebook. And I told him what he did. And he says, I don't really remember that. But when I showed him the artwork, again, that I'd sent to him, he says, yeah, we would have you would have been a good part of this. And what a guy, Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil.
Yes. Yeah, still some great guys, and there were great guys working still in comics.
Yeah.
So, enjoy
them. I love stories from Chuck and Graham about the guys that they worked with and how they met and how they started working together. It's just a fascinating history. And people, I remember I got into this argument one time with my dad, who was a professor of history, okay? And he said he loved Hollywood history and all that stuff too, but he didn't treat Hollywood history or comic book history as real history. And I'm like, who are you to judge that? It absolutely is as important part of the zeitgeist as anything. Men serving in war learned to read with the comic books. That includes my Uncle Jack. He was illiterate when he joined the army and fought in World War II. And he learned to read reading comic books. Yeah. Man, comic books are important. And
that's what I did too. I learned how to read way better reading comic
books. Like a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. No, but
I'm sorry, Al. You're seeing my dick side come out with my friends. I will shit on my friends. That's what I do.
Yeah, with and it was always with the Archie digests. That's some of the
Archies were really some of the first comics I read too. I love the Archies, man. Jughead was my hero, man. I love Jughead, and I love Moose, man. Moose is another favorite character. I mean, I like Archie, Reggie, and Veronica, and all that, but. No. Jughead and Moose were my two favorite characters. What were your two favorite characters, Al?
I like Jughead. I was just thinking about my time at Archie. I worked there for 8 years, and I think the characters I worked on most were probably Jughead. Yeah, Jughead and maybe Betty and Veronica.
Jughead always had the best stories in the best comedy.
He's really well designed too. You know.
Yeah.
On a shirt and the crown and everything, and yeah, he was a lot of fun.
I always loved that, and I used to practice drawing Jughead when I was a kid. The character I hated, Reggie. I hated that guy. He was a jerk.
He's supposed to be a jerk, though, isn't he?
Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah.
I know. But as a kid, I got to tell you, here's a weird one, Al. Okay, when I was a kid, my brain couldn't fathom the concept of what animated cartoons really were. And I remember I used to think, seriously, that the characters of the Flintstones were actually naked under those clothes. They were drawn naked under them. And then they drew the clothes on them. That's how my tiny little brain worked. I'm so weird as a kid. I can see by the look on your face, it's like, what was wrong with you?
I
mean, it makes sense. You know, you get dressed, right?
Yeah, it's what I had this image in my head watching the Flintstones as a kid, man, that they all had put their clothes on. That they wore clothes.
But isn't that weird? Like you're talking about animation or even comics and how like lines on paper or something you see on a TV screen become real people.
They become
that's
real.
the wonderful thing about characters and stories that are so well done, because really it's just, lines on paper. And, if you can make a great story with using lines on paper and create a wonderful world and wonderful characters, then we should be doing that. We should be doing more of that.
Absolutely. Keith, anything you want to add before the end of the show?
You know what? I think you guys are pretty much covered it. I mean, seriously, it's just, again, for me, coming from the angle that I do, I'm coming at it as a fan and a reader. I've never had the opportunity to work in the industry, but I find it fascinating, and I just love the art form. So
yeah. And I like your cartoonish style, by the way, Al. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, once again, I just don't want Keith feeling alone during the show, that he's not the only brother on the show. And no, that's not Al Sharpton.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
jeez.
All right. So for our moment of Zen, may I add this? Because I don't mean to take over the show for you, Keith, but I really feel like we should wrap up here. It's 13 minutes after the 2-hour mark. This is your moment of Zen. Hulk is a ripoff of Baby Huey.
Wow.
True. Yeah.
That's your moment of Zen. Al, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you took my invitation to join. We'd like to have you back again anytime. And I hope you had a good time.
I always enjoy talking shop, and you gentlemen were wonderful. And thank you for the discussion. It was great. Yeah, if you want to do another video, especially just specifically talking about like some of the creators we've known or come across in the comic book industry who have had an influence or were and are great men. That would be a nice topic to sort of delve into.
Absolutely. And that's the day we do that is on Thursdays, because that's Keith's show. I'll pop in. I always love popping in because Keith and I don't get to hang out like we used to. I do want to talk about this also before going. I'm negotiating a contract for next year to do this book as a full graphic novel. The Exorcist Academy, the Repossession Experts. And I'm looking forward to that. We even have music that I wrote for it that they commissioned me to do. So that's going to be fun when that finally gets released.
Nice.
Yeah. That'll be probably won't come out until 2026 because it'll take me all year to draw that. I don't know how fast you work. When I'm doing graphic novels, I'm doing all of the artwork. It takes me a long time to get those done. So I finish about 10 pages of full artwork, all done from finish, beginning to finished artwork. 10 a month is my max. So it usually takes me anywhere from 10 months to a year to do a graphic novel.
Wow.
What's your reaction to that, Al?
Well, I guess I was questioning like how many, so you're talking about like 100, 120 pages?
104 is my goal.
Yeah.
That's something I learned from IDW is that keep it at 104. That way you can charge less than $20 for the book.
Right. So that's what I did with the Sword of Eden Shinobi. That's 100 pages. And volume 3 of the Sword of Eden is going to be around 100 pages or so. And that should be out next year. So I think, yeah, that's kind of the speed in which I work. You know, writing, drawing, lettering, scanning in and cleaning up about 10 pages.
Exactly. Because I'm part of the planning process for this book as well, because I'll be working directly with the writers, helping them structuring the story, helping them understand also how to write for comic books. There's a training thing I got to do with them, because a lot of writers think they know how to write comic books. And it's like, no, you don't know how to write a comic book. You have to understand writing screenplays is a good start. But to understand how to do page one and then how many panels are on there and guesstimate, you know, the words, you've got to understand you can't put too many words in there because, you know, there has to be room for the artwork. I ran into that with one graphic novel, Al, that led to a 20-minute rant on YouTube of me going off on writers that don't know how to write for comic book artists. And nothing pisses me off more than a comic book writer who writes the thought process of the character in. And I'm like, look, man, don't waste my time with that. All I need to know is like time of day, what they're wearing, what kind of weather it is, and if he's angry, raging, or what. Don't tell me what he's thinking, because I don't give a shit what he's thinking. I have to know what to exhibit with him. And stop writing to, because when you write, you're not writing for the audience. When you're writing a comic script, you're mostly writing for the artist.
Well, I think especially like the wonderful thing about comics and graphic novels is that you can get so much information in an illustrated panel in one image. You can get a whole lot of information there. So that's one of the wonderful things about creating comics and reading comics and graphic novels.
Yeah, learning how to do sequential art is something that just came to me. I guess because I grew up on comic books and watching movies.
Oh, yeah.
And so I understood how it worked. And so I didn't get to go to Joe Kubert School, which I always wanted to. All my friends have gone to Joe Kubert School, except me. And they're like, why didn't you go? I said, because I'm dirt poor. I couldn't afford it. And I've been working as an adult since I was 17, you know, and I just didn't know how to do that stuff. And I would have killed to have gotten a chance to go to Kubert School. But I've learned from some of the people I've worked with. And I also studied under Drew Struzan. I don't know if you know who he is. He's the Star Wars and Indiana Jones artist. He does all the movie posters and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Which is how I learned to do airbrushing and painting movie posters and book covers. It's from him. And so the two artists that influenced me, and let's hear yours, is Drew Struzan and Al Williamson.
Al Williamson, great illustrator. I actually like
that is who I draw most like. Is Al?
Yeah,
Williamson.
his stuff was great. Then he became an inker, and he was working on Daredevil with John Romita Jr. And yeah, I love Al.
He also worked with what's his name with The Empire Strikes Back. He worked with him.
Yeah, I had those. Oh, that was just gorgeous. Yeah, he's one of the more classicist kind of guys.
Carlos, what was his name? Garzon? Is it Carlos Garzon? I can't remember his name. The artist he worked with. But look at this, and you can see that the influence of Al Williamson on how I drew that.
Oh yeah, yeah. He had a very realistic style. Hal Foster, Dave Stevens, like those guys.
Well, he was one of the artists as well as Frazetta that worked with Hal Foster, and and they all worked together. They were close friends. I got to meet and be friends with Bernie Wrightson before we lost him. But Bernie, Al Williamson, and Frank Frazetta were just, they were best bros.
Yeah, they were,
and they'd work with each other all the time.
Wow. Yeah, I think growing up, you know, when I was in middle school or high school, and when I became very interested in the idea of working in comics, the people that really influenced me were like, you know, John Byrne and Terry Austin on anything they did in the 80s, especially the X-Men, and Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. Again, when I got
Frank
older,
had an impact on me too. I started doing, because of him and Mike Mignola in the 80s, I altered the way I stopped doing so much cross-hatching or hatching and started focusing on doing starker, harsher blacks.
Yeah. I was talking
I loved it
about that earlier.
Yeah,
it's absolutely those two. Frank Miller and Mike Mignola were the last artists to impact me. before I turned pro. And absolutely
guys
agree.
Those guys were great. But yeah, again, when I got older, then I really got into like Jack Kirby, and then I was very familiar with the work of Will Eisner, and those guys were.
And Jack Kirby's been criticized. Like his musculature was off sometimes, and I said, it depended on two things: if he was being rushed, and who was his inker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he created that whole superhero style of drawing, and he drew everything. He drew like crime comics and kick gang stories and like cowboys. Like he drew romance comics. Like Kirby like did everything, and not only that, like he created, in my opinion, almost all of these Marvel characters. So the impact that Jack Kirby has had on this medium, on this industry, it goes without saying.
Here. That's exactly how I feel about that.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, without Jack Kirby and the work he did on Challengers of the Unknown, you wouldn't have Fantastic Four.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
by the way, this is one of my Drew Struzan-esque paintings I did for Drew Struzan.
I like that.
As a Christmas gift.
Nice.
And that was all digital too?
Mixed medium. Actual pencils imported in and then painted in Photoshop.
That's beautiful.
That was it. And Drew wrote this wonderful letter, and I've showed it. I know I showed Martin. I don't know if I think I showed Keith too. The letter I got from him, where he considered me one of the true heirs of the Drew Struzan style. And that was like one of the happiest days of my life to be told that by the master himself. I'm like, yay, me. I'm still struggling. I'm starving, but I love that.
Yeah, encouragement is very important.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But once again, I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying talking to you. We'll wrap this up. You got to have you come back again. That'll be fun.
Absolutely.
And Keith, you want to head us out of here?
Sure. Look, I just want to, again, say just thanks to everyone. Thanks to Al, Mike, Gary, Martin. Also, a big thank you to really Anima Confusa, because she's cool like that. Jeebus, Chinatsky, Wolverine.
That's my fiance.
60 Gap After Dark, Wade, Nadia, Miss Toe, Miss A, Andy Morrow, Penny, and of course Tim. And so, look, just have an incredible day, everybody, and I hope
absolutely
to be back here next week. So, for everybody here, I have been Keith, and you have been Juan.
Don't forget tomorrow. Oh, we're doing another classic movie, War of the Worlds. I think Forbidden Planet tomorrow.
Yeah, Forbidden Planet.
All right.
So
have a good Thursday, guys. This episode has been brought to you by Colonizer Jeebus. Why do we love him?
That's all, folks.